In the sweltering heat of the Colombian jungle, a group of believers marched towards their destiny. There were dozens of them, maybe over 100, all members of the same congregation, and they plunged into the trees on July 2nd, 1999, embarking on what they called a spiritual quest. But not one of them was ever glimpsed upon again. Now, this is just one of the strangest mass disappearances in history, an entire community seeming to vanish off the face of the earth. Some say they got lost and perished in the wilderness. Others believe more sinister forces were at play. But a handful of true believers have a far more incredible theory, that this group was literally brought aboard UFOs like modern-day prophets ascending to the heavens. Now, I don't know if that's true, but what I do know is that this is only the beginning of some of the most bizarre vanishings of people obsessed with aliens and UFOs. From jungle cults convinced of an imminent rescue from spaceships to lone eccentrics building their own flying saucers in anticipation of contact, these stories strain credulity. Not all of them may be rooted in reality, some might just be legends or hoaxes, but the evidence remains as inexplicable today as when these incidents first happened. Now, the case of the vanishing Colombian church group wasn't the first time that a UFO-obsessed group had mysteriously vanished. In fact, just 2 years prior, there was another infamous cult that took things even further. In March of 1997, the bodies of 39 members of Heaven's Gate were discovered in a mansion in San Diego. Their leader, Marshall Applewhite, had convinced them that by ingesting a lethal cocktail of phenobarbital and vodka, they would graduate to a higher level of existence. You see, the cult believed that the Hale-Bopp comet passing overhead was a sign heralding a spaceship sent to collect their very souls. By shedding their containers, their human bodies, they expected to ascend onto that UFO and travel to a new plane of being. Of course, no spacecraft ever arrived, and the only visitors to that mansion were police, discovering their bodies neatly laid out under purple shrouds. Now, unlike the Colombian church group, in this case there was clear evidence of what had happened. But it does make you wonder if Heaven's Gate could believe so deeply they'd willingly die for it. What might other UFO cults have done to achieve what they imagined was an alien ascension? In the summer of 1999, a story started circulating that drew instant comparisons to the Heaven's Gate tragedy. It involved the disappearance of an entire church congregation in the jungles of South America. But unlike Heaven's Gate, no bodies were ever discovered, so what really happened? Well, the truth continues to remain shrouded in mystery, rumor, and possible cover-ups to this very day. The church was called the Stella Maris Gnostic, founded in 1989 deep in Colombia by a man named Rodolfo Perez. Stella Maris established its headquarters in the coastal city of Cartagena, and it was from there in 1999 that between 60 to 100 followers walked off into the jungle, never to return. Now, to the core beliefs of this church remain obscure, but clues can be found in its name. Stella Maris means Star of the Sea, while Gnosticism is an ancient Christian theology with some sci-fi-esque ideas. You see, Gnostics believe that the material world was created by a flawed, inferior god known as the Demiurge, almost kind of like an alien overlord that trapped our souls in this physical realm. To escape, they seek inner knowledge, or gnosis, that allows the divine spark within people to ascend back to the true God at the time of death. And Gnostics think the malevolent Demiurge uses agents called archons, or interdimensional beings that manipulate humanity. Now, just imagine for a moment if politicians were secretly these archons. The point is, Gnostics have some far-out beliefs closely tied to the occult and supernatural. So when the Stella Maris flock vanished without trace, some wondered if they had achieved the ultimate Gnostic goal, which is shedding their human forms to ascend to a higher realm of cosmic existence. Of course, others were far more skeptical, thinking the disappearance simply pointed to a tragedy or an elaborate hoax. What do you believe happened? Did the Stella Maris meet their maker, or something beyond human comprehension? Now, it seems likely the Stella Maris Church share the cosmic beliefs of ancient Gnosticism. They too thought this physical world was a prison created by a false god, and that true salvation meant ascending to a higher realm of spiritual existence. For them, that day of escape just might have come in 1999. You see, local Catholics and Protestants had always seen the Stella Maris as a doomsday cult. The church was fixated on the end times, telling members that benevolent aliens would come and rescue true believers before the world's imminent destruction. Followers were promised a trip to the stars, but only if they severed all ties with outside family and friends. Now, the church's leader, a man named Rogelio Perea, was actually accused of brainwashing and siphoning members out of money to fund his lavish lifestyle. People like Enrique Aguilar, who claimed his wife sold all their possessions to pay for a mysterious 1999 pilgrimage. Or Mariela Tovar, whose daughter was told she was God's chosen one and forced to change her name to Stella Maris. By mid-99, things were really ramping up. Members grew more withdrawn and secretive, planning for something really big. The church announced an annual spiritual retreat. Nothing out of the ordinary, or so they thought. But shortly after, an estimated 60 to 100 members headed off into the Colombian wilderness, and then nothing. They never returned. Now, this vanishing of the Stella Maris Church immediately made international headlines. I mean, you don't just have 100 people vanish without a trace and no one says anything about it. Colombian newspapers described them as a cult that walked off into the Sierra Nevada mountains, an area, mind you, with many UFO sightings. In fact, a lost city called Ciudad Perdida had been found in those same mountains in the 70s after being mysteriously abandoned only centuries prior. Some had wondered if the ancient builders, the Tyrona, had also been retrieved by cosmic forces. And now Stella Maris seemed to be the latest group ascending to the stars. The Colombian press would report the church meant to actually contact extraterrestrial beings on the same pilgrimage, and they succeeded boarding spaceships and leaving Earth behind. Local authorities were understandably concerned given the recent mass suicide of the Jonestown cult in Guyana in 1978. That's when nearly 1,000 Americans had died drinking poisoned Flavor Aid, which, despite rumors, was not Kool-Aid. But Stella Maris showed no suicidal tendencies. Still, families were distraught, telling any media outlet that would listen about the church's obsession with aliens and UFOs. Men like Enrique Aguilar, whose wife took their daughters on the fateful trip, was convinced they'd be saved from apocalyptic doom by otherworldly beings. Or Pedro Perez, with 4 relatives gone, who said the church went to the mountains to meet extraterrestrials. No search mission ever commenced. The members had left voluntarily, if not mysteriously. But had they, like the ancient Tyrona, ascended to a higher state unknown to modern humanity, or were more earthly sinister forces at play? Another woman named Andrea de Echenique, mother of Stella Maris Gnostic church member Maria Bernarda, said this: "My daughter told me she had to leave because our cataclysm was going to occur and that she had to go to a high place to meet extraterrestrials who would save them from the end of the world. The leader of the group told them the world was going to end in August and that they had to go meet some aliens. She was convinced that cosmic beings were coming to save a chosen few from some big catastrophe. I couldn't stop her." Now, other Gnostic officials started coming forward, painting a portrait of Stella Maris as a fringe group, even by esoteric standards. Wilson Martinez, a Gnostic bishop from Bogota, said people describe them as fanatical and dogmatic. Obsessed with meeting UFOs for the past 2 years, the story went worldwide, with papers printing more accounts from shell-shocked family members. But while the media spun their theories, police carried out a very extensive search of the Stella Maris compound. And it was a strange place, pews and plaster walls above, sparse living quarters below. Still, nothing concrete to explain the disappearance. And before long, the mystery was gaining legendary status. But there was one tiny problem with the story. Some members of Stella Maris eventually did reappear. And soon after, some prominent members tried quelling the storm of theories and speculation. Danny Perez, whose father was highly placed in Stella Maris, informed reporters there was nothing to fear. This was just a routine spiritual retreat, no different than they'd done before. He called talk of suicide pure fiction, saying the church was less than a year old. But Danny's explanations only raised more questions. Stella Maris was clearly a decade old, not brand new. And multiple families unambiguously described the church's obsession with UFOs and aliens. Rumors persisted that some members never ever returned from the jungle. A few did whisper of ritual suicides. Others believed the missing fell prey to militant guerrillas in the hills, but no ransom demands ever came. It was like these believers simply just blinked out of existence. In fact, very few stopped to ask if Stella Maris genuinely ascended onto a UFO. So was Danny's version just a cover story? The gaps and contradictions in the official account suggest more transpired on this spiritual quest. I mean, after all, Gnostic theology has deep cosmic roots, essentially depicting the creator of Earth as a flawed alien overlord. I mean, to ancient Gnostics, escaping this planet could be seen as liberating one's soul. Now, some strands of UFO theory align closely with Gnostic cosmology. They view our world as a prison planet where malicious entities like cryptids, demons, or evil aliens have simply been quarantined here. Like Gnosticism, the UFO field is syncretic, weaving together spiritualism, theosophy, ancient wisdom, and New Age beliefs. Looking at Stella Maris through this lens, their vanishing could be seen as breaking free of our containment below. Perhaps they escaped the warden on this cosmic Alcatraz, transcending to join more enlightened beings above. But of course, most accounts paint the church's disappearances a simple hoax. But I'm left wondering, could something more sinister or surreal have truly transpired? Unfortunately, the truth behind this disappearance remains a mystery. In 1966, one of the strangest disappearances ever tied to UFOs took place, not the vanishings of bodies, but the minds and souls. Among later researchers, this infamous case would become to known as the lead masks case. It all began on a sunny August afternoon in a suburb across the bay from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, called Niterói. A young boy was flying a kite on Morro de Vintem, a hill with a long history of being a rough area plagued by petty crime. And as his kite darted over the hill's grassy summit, the boy spotted something that would stop him in his very tracks. Peering down, he sees two corpses lying motionless on the ground. Shocked by this discovery, the boy rushed to tell local authorities. But given the hill's unsavory reputation, police were understandably very hesitant to investigate. They waited until first light the following morning before mounting a search. And on August 21st, officers led by investigator Oscar Nunez carefully climbed the hill to confirm the report. And upon reaching the top, they stumbled upon a very bizarre scene. Ladies and gentlemen, this wasn't just a typical homicide. This was strange. Two bodies, just as the boy described, stretched out in the grass, but the strangest details were yet to come. Both men were smartly dressed in formal suits, despite the warm August weather, and covering their eyes were strange lead masks, obscured as if they wanted to block out all outside light. Yet there were no signs of any violence, trauma, or a struggle. And at the scene, investigators uncovered a number of very bizarre clues. There was an empty water bottle, packets of wet towels, scraps of aluminum-coated paper, cellophane, and a handkerchief monogrammed with the initials AMS, though neither victim's names matched these letters. Most intriguing were sheets of paper filled with scribbled electrical formulas, and a small notebook contained cryptic instructions that read this: meet at the designated spot at 4:30 p.m. At 6:30 p.m., ingest the capsules. After the effect is produced, protect half of the face with lead masks. Wait for the prearranged signal. Even more vague than IKEA furniture assembly directions. Autopsies were eventually conducted, but critical oversights hampered the results. No toxology tests were performed, and by the time the backlogged coroner examined the bodies, well, the internal organs had decomposed too far to be of any use. The official cause of death could only be guessed at, some kind of cardiac arrest occurring between August 16th and August 20th of 1966. Now, in time, the victims were actually identified as Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana, local electronics repairmen from a town near Rio. Both men were married and Miguel had several children. Neither of their names matched the AMS initials found at the scene. With the bodies offering few concrete answers, investigators turned their focus to retracing the victims' final days, and soon they would uncover connections suggesting this was no ordinary crime scene, but something actually rooted in extraordinary belief. And so police would piece together the victims' last known moments, and on August 17th, both men had boarded a bus in their hometown, claiming they were going to pick up materials for work, and they carried the equivalent of $1,000 in cash. Now, around 2 p.m., they brought raincoats in a Tiro and stopped at a bar where witnesses described Miguel as extremely nervous, constantly checking his watch. Very strange, right? Well, they left directly for Morro de Vintem, arriving to the hill around 3:15. Locals confirmed seeing them alive as late as 5 p.m. that day, but no clear cause of death. Authorities grasped at straws, considering everything from a smuggling mishap to homosexual suicide pacts, which was apparently a common 1960s presumption. But as one detective told famed UFO researcher Jacques Vallée, none of the evidence supported those neat explanations. No sign of violence, no poison in their bodies, no clues at all to how or what killed them. Intriguingly, a rash of UFO sightings occurred that same evening over Morro de Vintem Hill. In fact, one respected local witnessed an oval orange object wreathed in fire at the edges, and it hovered above the hill, emitting rays of light in all directions, and she would watch it with her children for 3 to 4 minutes before it shot out a blue beam and then vanished. Other accounts matched hers precisely, an unidentified fiery object beaming down rays over the hill at the exact time the men would have met their end. With no natural explanation for the deaths, investigators began considering, well, supernatural possibilities, and the sightings hinted at a link between the victim's fate and forces beyond our human understanding. In his book, Confrontations, A Scientist's Search for Alien Contact, Jacques Vallée explored the significance of the lead masks, as well as the background of both victims. Were they intended to shield the eyes of the victims from some form of radiation? The police found similar masks in a workshop in Miguel Jose Viana's home, along with remnants of the lead that had been used. Also found was a book on scientific spiritualism with underlined passages regarding to spirits, intense luminosity, and, well, masks. Speaking with Miguel's sister, police learned that he had talked of a secret mission that he was taking part in, and Manuel's widow revealed both men belonged to a spiritualist group, some kind of occult society with mysterious aims. And rumors swirled that this group was actually trying to contact alien beings. And so a civilian pilot named Elcio Carrera de Silva was allegedly part of it too. And Silva told of performing strange rituals with the victims, conjuring bright objects and explosions in the sky, confirmed by fishermen miles away. And these ceremonies had occurred just 2 months before the men's deaths. But when pressed, their families denied any occult experiments, claiming the explosions were simply homemade pipe bombs of all things. Now, in Miguel's final days, he'd argue with Silva about their beliefs. Miguel announced he was going to attend one final test to determine if he was a true believer or not. This appeared connected to the deadly event on the hilltop. Now, for years, potential suspects and self-proclaimed psychics alike emerged to offer theories about what happened, but really no substantial new leads have ever arose on this case. And again, to this day, the lead masks case still remains a mystery. Our final voluntary UFO disappearance takes place far, far to the north in the chilly climes of Vancouver Island, British Columbia. Unlike our earlier tale, details, it's a more hopeful story. Granger Taylor was something of an outcast in a small rural town of Duncan. With his eccentric, shy demeanor, he did not fit with the typical social lifestyle of his fellow residents. Instead of trying to make small talk at parties, Granger preferred to just keep to himself, immersed in his true passion, machinery. And by all accounts, Granger was a genius when it came to anything mechanical, an impressive feat considering he had dropped out of school in 8th grade. And throughout the late 1970s, he became locally known as a mechanical anthropologist, rebuilding and restoring old cars, trucks, bulldozers, and other various heavy equipment. Now, over the years, Granger's projects made him famous around town. He would reclaim old vehicles left for scrap and would get them running again. He would haul discarded locomotives out of the woods and actually repair them, and would use spare parts found in the forest and some photographs for reference. Holy crap, this kid's a genius. He even rebuilt an entire World War II fighter plane, a Kitty Hawk, out of scrap metal, reconstructing it into a replica that looked like it would belong in a museum. His friend Darren Mans would claim that most of the stuff that Granger knew was simply God-given talent or just self-taught, and that he was a mechanical genius as far as being able to look at something and figure out how it worked to be able to deconstruct it and put it back together again. Perhaps Granger's most famous project was a supposed life-sized spaceship that he built using the same set of skills that put to work on terrestrial machinery. The structure obviously wasn't space-worthy, but was impressive. Fashioned from a pair of satellite dishes, its interior included a wood stove and a bed. And so Granger had a long-standing fascination with extraterrestrials, going so far as to claim that he was even in contact with off-world intelligences. Some suspect that he came to this conclusion through the use of drugs, while others feel that his manic-depressive personality would foster delusions, or from another perspective, these vectors generated legitimate communication with non-human beings. Either way, it was the fascination that led to his disappearance. Journalist Tyler Hooper, who had participated in a documentary about Granger, said, "I think at some point he got tired of being different and searching for meaning, on Earth at least." At the time of Granger's disappearance, pop culture was alive with the idea that something was out there in space, and he became obsessed with interstellar travel. Granger Taylor's saga came to a head on November 29th, 1980, when he was 32 years old. Now, it was during this stormy night that he vanished from the face of the Earth. And there are really only few clues as to what may have happened to him. The first comes in the form of a letter that he left behind for his parents, tacked to his bedroom door, written and signed in his hand. "Dear Mother and Father, I have gone away to walk aboard an alien spaceship, as recurring dreams assured a 42-month interstellar voyage to explore the vast universe, then return. I'm leaving behind all my possessions to you as I will no longer require the use of any. Please use the instructions in my will as a guide to help. Love, Granger." Now, the reverse side of the note included a map of Waterloo Mountain, not far from the family farm. It was unclear whether or not it was related to his disappearance. Now, both Granger's parents and the Duncan police spent months searching for Granger but could find nothing. And by the time they accepted their son's fate and reread his will, they noticed two curious amendments. Granger had crossed out the word funeral, then replaced it with death. This too had been struck through and replaced with the word departure. The case remained cold until March of 1986, when local forestry workers discovered an old automobile near Mount Prova, British Columbia, around 4.5 miles from Duncan as the crow flies. It was a blue Datsun pickup truck, later confirmed as belonging to Granger. The vehicle had clearly exploded. The surrounding scene yielded fragments of bone and a piece from one of Granger's shirts. Now, although DNA testing was not widely available at the time of this discovery, the suggestion was pretty clear that Granger had taken dynamite, some of which had disappeared from the family farm the night of November 29, 1980, and blew himself to bits, either on purpose or by accident. Neighbors in the Mount Prova vicinity even heard an explosion the night he vanished. Now, if we look at subsequent pathology work from the coroner, it suggested that the remains were indeed those of Granger. Of course, some of his friends did remain skeptical, however, saying that until DNA evidence is carried out, exactly where Granger Taylor went remains inconclusive. One of his proteges, Robert Keller, was only 15 years old at the time, but remains adamant that his mentor was far from suicidal. He would go on to claim that Granger wasn't a nut, and that he was a very intelligent guy who would carry on with his life pretty normally. But if you would mention the word spaceman, then all of a sudden Granger would turn into a total nut. He even went on to say that to this day he will leave his back door unlocked in case Granger ever does decide to return home. Now, those who believe that Granger is alive cling to a number of possibilities. The explosion heard on November 29th, 1980 wasn't dynamite. The night had been stormy, so it could have easily been thunder, or maybe, just maybe, a spaceship's engines igniting. In fact, Granger had told Robert that the aliens would likely descend under the cover of a thunderstorm to hide their arrival from others. Okay, I see where he's going with this. Other things bother Robert Keller. He claimed that Granger's pickup wasn't blue, it was a Pepto-Bismol pink. He even helped Granger with the paint job, and he also says that despite the blast radius being listed as 600 feet in diameter in the coroner's report, it has not been relocated since its initial discovery in 1986. Nor, according to Robert, could Granger's death have been accidental. He would explain this. Granger was too smart to have an accident up on the mountain. I mean, there's no way. He knew how to handle explosives. He was basically an expert. So when it came to safety, that was his #1 priority. It doesn't work with me. He wouldn't have had an accident, and he wouldn't have done it on purpose. So is it possible that he killed himself? I mean, it's really hard to accept that. I know that's a possibility, but there's all kinds of possibilities. People who believe that Granger Taylor still lives suggest that maybe the blast site was a ruse, part of a government cover-up that unfolded when they took Granger into custody for knowing too much about flying saucers. Others might think that the cover-up was perpetuated by his interstellar contacts who wished to throw Earthlings off the scent of his disappearance. I mean, there's a lot more to Granger's story, and anyone truly interested in learning more is encouraged to watch the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's 2019 documentary, Spaceman. It's a touching portrait of this eccentric man's life and legacy. Tyler Hooper, involved in the documentary's production, had this to say regarding his final feeling about Granger Taylor's disappearance. Was he abducted by aliens and taken to space? Did delusions cause Granger to blow himself up that night? Was it all an elaborate hoax that Granger created so he could disappear and start a new life? Was he recruited by a secret spy agency? Or did he die by suicide, masking his intentions with a suspicious note to erase the burden on his family? Whatever the reasons, I believe Granger was convinced extraterrestrials had chosen him to fulfill a greater universal purpose, something that far exceeded anything he could ever accomplish on our planet. My gut tells me that this was Granger's thinking the night he vanished, and that he perished on that mountainside in a fiery explosion. But often, on a clear evening, I find myself looking up at the night sky thinking about him. The idea that there may be something out there, extraterrestrials, another universe, or a galaxy teeming with life is simply overwhelming. Then I'll catch a glimpse of a shooting star or a meteor passing through the Earth's atmosphere and smile. If anyone could find a way to travel to another world beyond the cosmos, it would have been Granger Taylor. After all, when he put his mind to something, he did it. And because you guys made it this far into the episode, I want you to all comment down below to the stars, so I know who made it to the end and, well, who didn't. And if you guys enjoyed today's content, be sure to go ahead and slap that like and subscribe button for more content from yours truly. As always, I love you all, keep it up in mind, and I'll see you guys in the very next episode.